heavy bitch. Well, gentlemen, we're here today. I think we're on RO number... I don't want to get to lying to you. Let me get the book out. We'll take a quick look. It just takes a second here. So, let's see. We're working for... That's done. That's done. This is a 2x6? Oh, yeah, right here. Okay, so we're on RO number 17. The reason I'm on RO number 17 from RO number 7 is I allocated 10 RO numbers to a gentleman. And I called him. I said, hey, man, did you send up any of your equipment? No. So he's going to try and hustle it up here in the next week or so. In the interim, we're going to try and get a whole bunch of these other ones done. So this is an old school Xforce 2x6. This is an X600. This thing has got the big old iron fat ass transformers in the back of it. And between you and me, I hate working on them because they're so heavy. And out of the most things that I work on, this is probably one of the highest damaged in shipping units that you can possibly get. It's because the weight's all off-centered and stuff. Like this one that's got a little bent in the corner. We'll get that taken care of here in a minute. But I'm just saying overall, these things are kind of a pain in the butt because of the off-centered weight. Other than that, no big deal. You got to be very careful what transistors you put in them because of the floating voltage of the power supply. El flote of the tampone and the toilette voltage on the power supply that does things that make pixies and then smoke and Roger right on got down kind of things. Big ass power lead and it's on 110 volts. Son of a... In this same cabinet footprint, it is unbelievably common for us to get, well, up to 12 transistors in the thing and have the exact same power supply. What we figured out is each one of these transformers is roughly about 100 amps. So it's 2 driving 6. And if I'm not mistaken, what this gentleman wants to do is turn it into a straight 8 pill, which I'm totally going to be able to do for him. I think I got a couple Xforce / Fatboy power transformers around here. That's a lot of work though. We're going to do it together, you and me. So let's come over here and let's take a look for... It is so uncommon to have one of these here that isn't a giant burned up pile of dog dirt. I mean, just internally this is about the best that you can get for an example of one of these amplifiers. This is built by Carl and the boys. The exact same guys he's got working for him then are the ones he's got working for him now. The quality of the builds though has changed a little bit in my opinion, but that's a conversation for another day. So they're using phone lead on this one for the remote for the switches and shit. That's what this is, it's phone lead. So we've got 6 Toshibas 2879s and 2 2290s driving these other 6 transistors. So for us to make this work as a straight 8, I'm going to have to obviously change these out to 2 Toshibas, change this transformer out, and then I got to go and change the winding in this transformer, this transformer, this transformer, add another transformer here, change the winding in it, build 2 4-pill stages. So now I got to build a combiner. I'm going to do a different input splitter. So this is a 3-port, we'll go down to a 2. Well, actually, you know, it might be easier just to build this all in, yeah, it'd be way easier to build this all in just 4-port sections. So let's say I'm really creative and we'll do a 4-port splitter and a 4-port combiner. So that's all I'm having to do is change out the combiner. And then I'll build a separate individual new 2-pill section here. And then I can add another piece of 316 coax, change out the capacitors on the back of these things. Way easier. like way easier. Otherwise I gotta change all the windings, build combiners, build new input splitters, all this other shit, or I could just simply add 2 4-port combiners, lump sum Wilkinson combiners, by the way, commonly referred to in the CB community as wagon wheel combiners. So build new combiner, put about $300-400 worth of parts in here, bypass this variable that's in the front, drop that out. Man, this thing is in really good shape for as old as it is. You got to think this thing was probably made X600. Arlen bought the business 8-9 years ago. This predates that. So this could be a 12 or 14-year-old amplifier, give or take 10 years. Nah, it'd go in the other direction. It could be older, but this is a fine example of what we had before we went to the switch modules for power supplies. The main leap forward that we've had is getting rid of the iron core transformers, right? So let's see, do I have examples of what I'm talking about? I think I do. And, well, here, let me grab these out of the trash. So the first leap forward that we had was we went from transformers to switchers of this size. Each one of these switchers, they're labeled at a 40 something amps. They're actually good for about 30. So the cabinet got a little bit longer to house enough switch modules. These are for driving LED lights, like displays and strip LED and that kind of stuff. And they were relatively cheap. Each one of these transformers at the time were several $100s a piece. I don't know what Xforce was getting for these because they had their own winding machine. But it allowed us to get rid of the flaky bridge rectifiers that were in here, get rid of the weight of the transformers, get rid of the electrolytics, and go to something that weighed a couple ounces versus 60 pounds, right? So they would stack as many 30 amp modules in here as they needed. They'd make the cabinet just a little bit longer, and they could just start stacking up the modules. Well, the latest thing that's happened in the last year and a half is everybody has decided, I might have had some influence in this or something, I don't know. I don't know if they just got forgotten about. I know that these were in use long before I made them popular, like they were out there. I just think the problem was that there wasn't enough quantity of them when people would go to buy them, right? So if, let's say you're Xforce or Fat Boy or pick a builder, if you're a large builder, not a hobby barn shop like myself here, but like a really large, you're making 100% of your income off of doing new amp builds. When you go to the store to go buy parts, you want to be able to buy hundreds, if not thousands of them, not 4 or 5 at a time, right? These come from server. Sorry about that. My battery died on my mic pack. So these come from server farms, okay? So these have been in use for, this small package supply has been around forever. This unit right here on 220 volts does 100 amps. This one module. You can see the progression of things from iron core to big bulky LED switchers, but were much lighter and incredibly cheap, right? So when you buy these in bulk, you'd be about $14 to $18 per unit. The common guy that was buying them off Amazon, Fleabay, that kind of thing, was paying $20, $25 per unit, right? So you'd need 3 of these modules to equal 1 of these. So think of the footprint difference. I could stick 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these in this space and have a 600 amp supply if you could feed it enough 220 volts versus a 200 amp supply that weighs a frickin' truck ton, right? And that's the progression. The old school box. Needless to say, there's enough power supply here to easily run 8 transistors, right? The problem we're running into, though, it's on 110 volts. Okay. There's a way to convert this to 220. It just takes a lot more work than it does with these. With these, all you got to do is change out the plug. It auto senses, auto switches, and everything through this plug. These, you had to flip the switch down the side for the 220. I'm getting off topic. Let's get back to the amplifier. The next progression of this is obviously going to be a switch module like this. and it's got a little bit bigger fan on it, so it moves a little bit more air. This is a 130 amp switcher. So once again, instead of having two 100 amp modules, you can put one of these in, or instead of having three 100 amp modules, you put two of these in, have the same end result, roughly, give or take a few amps. And what made that so neat when we went to those other modules is I was able to find somebody that had quantity of those. He has long since sold out of those supplies, as everybody knows, because he was offering each one of those modules shipped, delivered for $20 a piece. It just didn't make sense to stay in the rut that we were in with the 30 amp switchers. And it's all in how you convert the switcher, right? And how clean you are, your workbench is, your workspace, how managing solder splash you have when it comes to those smaller modules, because lots of little small parts, one little piece of solder flick, none of the module works, or the smoke comes out. But this is old school, fat bottom girled iron technology. It's got a preamp in it, it's got sideband delay, but no bias. So the guy is wanting me to convert this into an 8, straight 8, and add bias to it, which is good. We can still get away with that. The new transistors that share the same part number as the Toshiba, the HG parts, for a long time were not conducive to us using floating non-regulated supplies. That higher resting voltage, let's say 18, 19 volts, and then when you put the amp into operation, it applies a load. Pardon me, I'm trying not to let out a big old fat burp and a yawn on video here. When you put the amp into operation mode, this portion of the amp turns on and starts doing some work. Your voltage goes from 18, 19 volts, drops down to about 15, maybe 14 and a half, right? That's what these things are. These are your regulators. I've covered this in I don't know how many countless of thousands of videos, you guys. Please bear with me. I have to treat every video like it's the first time anybody's ever watched me. Like if you go scroll through the comments on any of my videos down in the doobly-doo down below, you'll see that there's quite a few people that show up randomly. They're like, I don't understand what I just watched. I'm new to this, da-da-da-da-da-da, or they'll ask a question that we've already covered 100 times in 100 other videos and they just haven't seen them. The annual amount of videos that I have now on the YouTube Gargler machine here is in thousands, right? And then I've got probably another 1,000 or so that are private, where I've repaired somebody's stuff and they don't want to have it out there on Front Street. So we're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of YouTube videos, right? So I have to treat every single one of these as their own individual little separate gems. That's just the joy of doing this. So I appreciate everybody hanging in there with me as I did that quick little, lesson in life on power supply history and talking about transistors, that kind of thing. So now everybody knows we're all on the same page. Now we can actually start talking about it. These amps are famous for having the entire back of the cabinet hanging wide open. There's a vent. It's like a 5-slot vent that runs end to end. I've got to cap all that off because we want the air to come into the cabinet, across the components, then through the heatsink and then exhaust out the back. Versus just letting all the air run out of all the vents and just maybe some air goes across the transistors. You don't know how many of these I've seen where the amplifier comes in and the board is discolored from the heat that has gotten sunk into the heatsink, and there just wasn't enough air moving through. Just was not moving through the heatsink. It's flowing out through everywhere, so we'll have to address that too. Okay, now that I've had a quick minute to look inside of this, and I have a rough idea, a number in my head, I'm going to go and I'm going to call and talk with a customer and see if he wants to go down this path, because this is going to be expensive, right? According to my accountant, I actually have to start charging for my time. I can't just charge, for the parts plus 10%. So I have to start having that realistic conversation with myself and the accountant. I do. It is what it is. So if we think I'm going to have probably 4, 5, 6, maybe 6 to 7 hours, probably about 6, in converting this all around and making this the way I like to make things. So Let's go chat with the customer and let's see what he wants to do. Maybe he just wants me to add bias and leave it as a straight 2x6. We will find out. All right, let's start here for the afternoon. So I removed our 2290 driver section. I got the pill pockets all cleaned out. And as you guys can see, I pulled the combiners out. So I'll build two brand new 4-port combiners. I'll put one here and one here. And all I have to do then is add one more piece of coax for the input, which will loop around this direction over to here. And then one more piece of output coax, which will probably terminate here and run to here. This isn't the traditional way of combining these things, but it works great. There's one less layer of combining and whatnot, so there'll be a little bit less loss there. We've got to upgrade these cabs. These are 150s, and these tiny little buggers that are in here are just not going to work. Well, they'll work, but they're not going to last. So I'm off to build combiners, cut coax, and drop a 2-pill 22 or 2879 section in here. And then we'll start on the biasing circuit. So give me a little bit and we shall return. Okay, let's see if I got everything in frame here. I think I do. Yeah, I do. Okay. So if you're ever to do one of these, a combiner swap out, the hardest part is to get the new transformer to stick. And a lot of it has to do with the type of hot glue that you're going to use. Hot glue is kind of uniformly accepted. You don't want to use silicone, you don't want to use epoxy, you definitely don't want to use super glue. Hot glue is flexible-ish, right? So this board will move in transport and whatnot. So we have to use a glue that's somewhat supple, soft, okay? So I've peeled off all the old hot glue. And then what you do is you come back with like a little flat blade screwdriver and we scratch the board up really good. And we increase the surface area and then we make the surface really rough. We even do it all the way out here into the copper where we haven't ground away the copper. We put down our hot glue and then we're going to overheat the hot glue. So you're going to use a high temp hot glue. It's going to come out of your hot glue gun like snot for the most part. And you're going to put hot glue on the bottom of your combiner or splitter, whatever it might be. Then after you've overheated this, then you're going to overheat this. So hot glue here first, let it cool down for just a second, then come back with a hot air gun or something, a paint stripper. Heat the hot glue up even hotter than when it comes out of the hot glue gun. Because remember, it's high temp, high strength hot glue. We can't use the stuff that you buy, you know, in Mama's bejazzling kit hot glue. We're going to get online, you're going to do high temp hot glue. It comes in multiple different colors. You want the stuff that's clear, not the stuff that's tan or brown. So we overheat this, then we put hot glue on the combiner. In this situation, it's a splitter. And then we overheat this and then put them together. And then we have to hold it in place. And then we don't want to move it until it's completely cooled down. The little scratches and the grooves and everything that we put down here on the board and into the fiberglass, the hot glue can sink into it when it's really super hot. And when it goes and cools down, it's just like the hot glues, we'll say this is the scratch. Hot glue is going to grab all the way around all of this stuff. So when it cools down, it's actually holding on, right? Or if we have a perfectly flat surface, there's not a lot of rough surface area for the glue to bond to, and it'll just pop right off. So let's squirt some of this snot out of the glue gun. Okay. And then we'll come along. And I'm putting about 400 degree air on this. It don't take much. We just want to push it out to where it's covering everything. Now remember, this glue is screaming hot now. It'll be just a consistency a little bit above like that loogie your mom hucked on one time. So now we're going to come along, we'll put a little bit of hot glue on the combiner, or the splitter. Not a lot, because you don't want it to run over the edges, just enough to cover all the wires. Then we pull our glue gun away, bring our hot air gun in here, and we're going to spin this thing as we heat it up to keep the glue from running away. And what we're doing is we're capitalizing on the surface area of the wire again. We're capitalizing on the surface area of the ferrite. Let it really run down in. Super, super hot. Super, super hot. Get this, rewarm this up just a little bit. And then we place this down in here. And we're just going to work it around just a little bit. Make sure it's nice and flat. You want to make sure that the wires that are making the combiner up don't touch any of the ground phenolic or the ground copper. See, it's starting to lean. We want to have clean copper, or I mean clean phenolic, no copper underneath the combiner or the splitter. In some applications, the copper can affect how well the combiner and splitter works, but for most applications, what we're trying to provide is a little bit higher electrical RF insulation. The chances of having the Teflon wire leak is still low, but the proximity to the board could cause a problem. If there's a tiny little pinhole in the Teflon wire, it could cause RF arc burn or bleed through. So that's why we scrape all the copper off the board. Okay, it's about set up now. There we go. Let that sit for a good 10 minutes or so, really thoroughly cool down, and then we can go ahead and start pinning coaxes to it. Okay, time to guys give you another little update and something else to think about. So I've got this 2-pill section put together. Now I got to thinking about it. I've got new transformers that are from Fat Boy. But you got to think, when this box was built was the early 2000s, let's say. Probably a little bit before that. So parts change over time, right? Especially transformers, and the ferrite material makeup changes. So this is an Xforce, okay? Xforce in the day might have possibly been known for maybe using 43 on the input and 63 out on the output. And what I mean by that is the material makeup of the transformers. I have those. But the transformers I've got are from Fat Boy, right? Now, we really start thinking about this. Now, is the magic schmoo that's in the parts exactly the same that I get from Fat Boy that are produced today versus the magic schmoo bits that make up these parts that was produced 20 years ago or 25 years ago? I claim that they are, but sometimes they're not. So I got to thinking, I was like, man, I wonder what I got in the bone pile. Because over the last decade and a half, let's say that maybe a couple boxes have been sent up here where the guys wanted me to rip the transistors out, put them into something else, and build something for them. Well, I saved those cabinets because all of those parts are valuable. The pill strips might be torn up, you know, we might need to replace some capacitors, but the transformer parts are important. This is out of an old Xforce 6-pill, this here and this here. The 1000 puff capacitor, which is a Simco, these are Simcos as well, is the same. All of these little things can make a difference when you're building, you know, a 4 2-pill staged amp, right? So there's a 2-pill, 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 2-pill. There's 4 2-pill amps in this thing. If I don't have at least the ferrite mix exactly the same, the signal that each 2-pill section puts out is going to be a little different. So this, from my standpoint, the builder standpoint, is a little bit tougher because we have to have the right parts to put in here. There's only 2 companies that primarily import ferrite in the United States, Amadon and actually Ferrite Company. Now, they probably come from the same vendor in China, but the material make, the powder that they press to make these the ferrite rings, might be a little bit different. Well, I'm trying to match the time when these parts are made so we can get exactly, or as close as we can possibly replicate, the output from each section to be the same, which is a little bit of a chore. So with new pill strips, old transformer. Now I popped off this cap here. I should probably bend this back up straight. Popped off this cap here and measured it, and it's within 1% of this cap here. The same thing with the 120s. Now, not all 104 disc capacitors, like this one here, are built the same. So we want to have the same amount of capacitance, because all capacitance in the circuit matters. This 180 that's here, and the 180 that's here, and the 180 that's here, and the 180 that's here that I measured them, they're all within 1%. The 104 disc capacitors I have are a little bit different capacitor level than the 104s that are in here. So what I did is I came over here to the power strip and I stole 2 of the 104s off the power strip because they were pulled from the same reel in the same place and put into the box at the same time. Straighten those out. Of course, 2-watt, 100 ohm resistors, and put those in place. Okay, so now what we've done is we've done our due diligence to try and match the manufacturing time, the quality of the parts that are inside the box. They have to come from the same place in the same time. And the wire, if you think about it, who's to say that maybe the 16 gauge wire that's in here might have 2 or 3 more strands to it versus the one that was produced 25 years ago? I don't know. We don't know. No one knows, right? So to take that layer of possible fucktivity out of the situation, I just went over to an old amp that was built around the same time. The odds are it having the same powder in the ferrites is increased. The gap on the face plates stay the same. Everything stays the same. So then on top of that, then I put 2 used 2879s that had gains of 68 and 65 in here. So good high numbered transistors, high gain numbered transistors. The coax lengths are exactly the same for all 4 sections. That's really important. If you're out there trying to copy what I'm doing here so you can do this yourself, keep that in mind. Just throwing that out there. So now let's go over here. Let's talk about longevity. So the weakest link has always been, and will always continue to be, the capacitor that's put on the output section of each one of the stages. Well, the 3 that were in there had these little tiny 150s. Well, these are 500 volt rated maybe. So what I did is I took metal clad capacitors, which have a much higher kVA rating. Otherwise they can put up more punishment, more heat, right? And I built 4 150s. 160, I think, is what I was shooting for. So this one's 163. Now that 10 picofarads worth of difference in capacitance value is not going to make a life or death difference if this is going to all work hand in hand. But we want to try and get it as close as we can. 158.7. As long as we get it in, I don't know, 5, maybe 10% window, we're not going to have any problems. 164. And the last one reads 149. I'm going to build another one of these. This is too low to work with these over here. This will cause a problem. And you see how me just touching the leads changes the values, all right? So let it go, 149. I'm going to build another one of these, and it's got to be around 160 for this to match. This will not work with these, so I got to go build one more. But we're replacing these capacitors here on each one of the output stages, here and here and here and here. The coax length here has to be the same for this new section that we just added here. So we got to have the same capacitance on all 4 of these sections, and we have to have the same length of coax. Now let's talk here. This is what we were using for the 6-pill section when this thing was originally a 6-pill. This little 150 at 6 kV barely can hold on to that much electrical pressure. So once we get our metal clads put in here, okay, and we'll tag in all of our leads that come from each one of the sections to the 4-porter, then we're going to have an inductor that goes from here over to the relay. Right here we'll add a trombone capacitor, because it's got a way higher kVA rating than this, and it'll put up with way more pressure than this little disc capacitor on our final tune. So that's how we're going to be able to compensate a little bit for the difference in the output. Now the inputs are within 1%. So we'll replicate Xforce. We're going to tag an inductor here. This is our original combiner here. So we'll tag an inductor that comes off of here, and then we'll bring it over. I'll put a piece of phenolic here, solder it to the board, then I'll cut a trace cut in the top and make it so the inductor is supported on this end, and then I can add capacitance as necessary. I might do another trombone tube here, go in the opposite direction. Probably not though, because there's not a lot of pressure on that. But as far as this thing being down, this transformer's down. That's why I was saying, if you were listening in the previous segment, this tips I'm telling you help a bunch. The only thing I got to do after that, after I get the caps in and all this other stuff built, I'm going to come back, I'm going to move the positive red wire. So I'll take this one, I'm going to move it down here so it's in between these two 2-pil sections. And I'll take this one, I'll scoot it up so it's in between these two 2-pil sections, these 4 transistors. That way the 100 amps that comes from this supply gets fed to these 2 transformers and these 2 4-pil, or these 2 2-pil sections, a total of 4, get fed off of this supply, and this one will feed these 4 transistors over here. With us having all the wires tagged down here on one end, and I've covered this in many YouTube videos, if we do this, technically we're summing together the 200 amps. Yes, technically, because they've added this little support rod in the solder, which is just nothing more than a piece of like 16 gauge copper wire. Because we've added that wire, technically this distribution bar can handle the current, but there's a wildly different voltage value that's present all the way at this end versus all the way down here on this end. Well, if all we have to do is split this, move this wire over here in between these 2, right about where this regulator is sitting, and then take this wire and set it right about here, right next to the regulator. Equal amount of current gets load shared between each 2-pil section, so everything should run evenly and have the same amount of current and the same amount of power supply fed to them. So this is what I spent my weekend working on. So this is all done. We got it all tuned out. Everything's ready to go. And everything works great. There's no imbalances on nothing. It's running great. And then I go to shut it off. And I flipped down on the switch just like that. And boy howdy did the sparks fly. Oh, it just reset itself. Hold on. Let me get in here and jerry-rig the switch. When I plugged it in, the switch was on. I didn't catch this little detail. At the side of the switch was a little borked, and when you move the switch, you see how it can rotate? So I flipped the switch down, it rotated just like that, and it took and shorted out the poles against each other. Pow! Sparks come flying out at me. I was like, holy shit, Batman! Ah, mother of pearl and snots! Woo! I mean, it must have shot an arc about that big out of the corner of this thing. So I had to go get a new switch. I don't like the new switches that they sell on eBay because they're straight from China and they're garbage. So we have this huge electronic recycler place that's here, and I went down today and I picked myself up an old school Allen Bradley 20 amp single pole double throw on off. Single pole double throw that are independent from each other on off. And the reason I need the single pole double throw is because we're switching on and off This is our 110 volt or 220 or 110 volt. And this is our 12 volt supply that runs all the electronics, the sideband delay and the preamp and all that kind of shit. But I'm going to change that out here in a minute, waiting for the soldering iron to heat up. We built a new combiner. We got our inductance all figured out. We got our capacitance all figured out. I'm not a big fan of having this kind of system where we have the capacitor supporting the other end of the coil. I'm not a big fan of that. So I used this little board and then cut a slot in the phenolic. So we've got something to solder to on both sides. Got the combiner all put together, and then over here we attach the relay for bias. So all this does is switch the 12 volt on and off for our load resistors, and checked all our load resistors. Those are all good. Did the power wire upgrades, moved everything around the way I said I would, and the thing works great with a 120 watt derail striker, which I'll show you here in a minute. I'm not powering it up with this switch in here. I'm just not doing it. So I'm going to switch the switch around, then we'll do the test. But it makes 17 to 1800 watts with 120 watts worth of drive. You put 200 in it, it makes 2000. So this guy's got himself like a 100 watt radio he's going to run in this thing. He's going to primarily run it on sideband. My answer to him was, well, I never tried it on sideband, but we're going to. I just had to get to the point where I had a decent switch that I trust. Right? They just don't make them like this anymore. I mean, they might. I'm just telling you. I took a minute, drove across town, went to the electronic place. I picked up about 20 of these things. They were like $4 or $5 a piece, but they're made in the USA, old school badassness, right? Back when we used to make all the little electronic odds and ends. The other thing I did, once I realized I was kind of stuck over the weekend, you'll see that there is this piece of phenolic that has been added along the back. And then over here is a whole nother piece of phenolic. And what that does is allows us to get more forced airflow. So here's the back side of the piece of phenolic that we use to cover up all of these vents. And then we cover up all the vents over here on the side of the case, and we force it down to these two slots. So this slot and about half of this slot. And that forces more air to get wrapped. So we have, on this particular cabinet, 6 120 millimeter fans. They're all pushing air into the cabinet. So the heat sinks for the bridge rectifiers, which I hate. I hate these rectifiers that are in here, but tomato. Forces air through the heat sink for the rectifiers, and all the air tumbles around, and it has to go around and go out through the heat sink. So we get more airflow across the heat sink is what we want. Now we leave this side open. We leave this side open because the heat sink's only about from here to here, right? So we want to leave enough space so that there's some extra airflow from the cabinet. So that way we're cooling, we're getting the hot air off all the components, like the two transformers, the rectifiers, and all the stuff on the top. We want to give it a place to go, but we want to increase the air pressure behind the heat sink so we get more airflow through that, especially for sideband operation, because this thing is going to get hot. Okay, let me get the switch changed out, and we'll go ahead and we'll run it. Okay, so we've repaired the switch on. Now don't freak out, there's a little white grain of wheat light bulb that's attached to a diode that's attached to a resistor on the inside of the relay. So sometimes when the circuit charges from us turning it on and off, see that? So don't freak out, that's normal. That's absolutely 100% how that relay works. Okay, so let's go over here first off. So this is a 1000 watt slug in peak, 1000 in average, 5 watt slug in reverse. Here's the radio drive. This is from the radio. About 120 watts worth of drive, right? Now we're going to go up here and we'll show you our pass-through SWR. So we're looking at the front of this 5-watt slug in reverse and the front of the striker. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. We want to get that as low as we possibly can, because remember, it works in both directions. The signal coming from the radio going through the amp to the antenna, and also versa, the receive coming from the antenna to the radio. We've got a preamp circuit in here, which is bullshit in my opinion. I don't know why people put these in these style amplifiers, but they do. It does work, but it's because of the extra length of inductor. We have just a slightly higher SWR. We compensated for it by putting a 25 picofarad capacitor here on the radio side of things. This is the radio side of, no, pardon me, antenna side of things. We compensated for the extra length of inductor with a little bit of capacitance to help the RF pass through both directions a little bit better. But all that aside, let's go over here and let's get our baseline set up. So let's take our 5-watt element and we'll make it so it's reading forward. And I currently have a 5-watt carrier going into the amplifier. So let's turn this around the other direction. Now let's turn the amp on. A 5-watt carrier going in gets us about a 200-watt carrier coming out. Hello, 1, 1. Okay, so now let's go up here and let's look at the input swerve for the amp. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, hello, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Seeing about 1 to 2 bars here, and we're seeing about a quarter to maybe a half a watt here. 1, 1, 1, 1, hello, and it's slightly falling backwards. Now I don't know what your radio is going to read on the other end on sideband, but I know that right now we've got this set up absolutely perfect for what we're doing. So let's go over here, and now let's start talking numbers. So we're putting 125 watts of drive in it. Now we're going to take it up to 2x because we're burying the 1,000 watt in peak. When we get here to the middle, between the 40 and the 60, that would be 50. That's 100 watts. Then right here is 120, all the way over to 2,000. So with 120 watts worth of drive, hello, audio, we're making about 19 and some change. Hello, okay? Now quickly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to the 490. My SR 490 striker, which does about 200 watts. Let's see, it's the blue coax. This should get us up to or really close to 2,000 watts peak by increasing the drive. I'll turn the amplifier off again. Hello, 1, 2, 1, 2. Let's go back down to 1x. And let's zoom in here. Hello. So we're reaching the top end of performance, right? So that means for us to get the max out of it, if we look at it on a scale, you get more response with less drive, but the more you get to the top end of the output of the amplifier, okay, you start seeing diminished returns a little bit. So let's turn the amp on. Let's turn this back up to 2x, and we should be right around 2,000 watts. Right around 2,000 watts, no problem. So at 220, 250 watts worth of peak power drive, you should get over 2,300 watts out of this thing. Okay, so now all of our baselines are covered. Let's go back over here to the striker real quick, and we're going to try this thing on sideband. Give me just a second to reset, and we'll be back. Okay, so let's see what we get for results. I've not tried this on sideband yet, but we'll see. So we're back down on 1,000 watts on this meter here. Hello, 1, 2, 1, 2. So we're straight on sideband, full up, straight sideband. Turn the amp on. We'll flip on the sideband delay. Hello. All right. So go up to 2x. We're going to bury that we're going to bury this 1,000 water in the corner almost continuously. So I bet you will see 14 to 15 change, right? But oh, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Seeing about 1850 peak out of it on sideband. But oh, 1, 2, 1, 2, audio. Now I can't run this very long like this without the fans being installed and running. 1, these are getting very hot. 2, the transistors are running at a higher voltage and they're getting hammered, right? So they're getting really hot too. Let me show you what I mean. I gotta treat this, it's like nobody's ever watched this before, you guys. You guys have never seen me do any of this stuff, and I gotta cover everything like it's new and oh, woohoo. This is an unregulated supply. I got in a huge debate on Facebook with a guy about the switching supplies, and he was going on and on and on. I'm like, dude, it doesn't work like this. He's trying to say just because the supply has got a label on it that says 1200 watts. I'm like, dude, there's no physical difference between the 1200 and the 1500 watt switcher versus other than just the fan that cools the 2 units. I'm gonna do a video about that later. Anyhow, our floating voltage is at 20 volts because it's unregulated. We're gonna watch that dramatically drop when we put this into operation. So when I key up, be watching this voltage and kind of out of the corner of your eye watch the output power of the amp, and you'll see how the two go hand in hand. Hello, 1, 2, 1, 2. Under full load, even though the power supply is resting at 20 volts, under full load it's dropping down to 14.2, which is perfect for these transistors. That's perfect. Absolutely perfect. So, on that note, let's shut this down, let's shut this off, and we're going to talk about what these little black things are here on the distribution bus. Okay, these are, I think, 1 amp internally controlled voltage regulators. So we feed 20 volts in on these regulators, and it looks just like a final on a radio, but it's just the case package. Feed 20 volts in, on the other side they're spitting out 14 volts. We have to do that because when the amplifier is at idle, the power supply is at 20 volts, the fans will be screaming if not letting the smoke completely out of them. And then as soon as we key, the fans are going to go spin down in voltage. So with us having a regulated supply through these regulators for the fans, they'll sit there and constantly run. So it doesn't matter if the power supply goes low, if it goes high, it doesn't matter. It's drinking from the well and it's putting out continuous voltage, regulated, so the fans stay nice and running, nice and smooth. Okay, amps off, electrolytics are depleted. Let me grab the case. We're going to solder up our 6 fans. We're going to plug our fans in. We're going to test this one more time with the fans running, and I want to see what we have for exhaust air temperature. Your air temperature is going to be critical, Mr. G. Critical. You might want to get yourself a remote temperature probe or something that you can hang right back here by the exhaust vent, not inside, outside, where the outside air and the inside air have a chance to kind of merge. So the air coming out of the cabinet, just like have it hanging out here in free space, and just keep an eye on your air exhaust temperature. There's a lot of things inside this cabinet producing heat, and we want to keep an eye on that because temperature is what kills these transistors quicker than anything else in the world. They get too hot, they can't get rid of the heat, there's not enough airflow, it kills them. That's the downfall of this entire design. That and how freaking heavy it is. And by the way, stick around because I'm going to show how to package this. I'm going to show you some tips that I picked up from our friend Carl that used to own Xforce, which now builds underneath the name Carl Built. We had a conversation one time, it was very quick in passing. We're talking 10 years ago, where he was telling me about the only way he was ever able to figure out how to get these things to the customer without there being any damage. And I'm going to show you what that trick is. It's very simple. but we're going to cover that here in just a few minutes. So let's put the lid on it. Let's give it one more run. So let's take our anemometer, which is basically the wish.com of a bird kestrel unit, but let's see, what do we got? We've got 6.7, 6.8, 6.9, 7 miles per hour worth of wind. Let's see here, we'll do knots equivalent. 6.7, 6.8 knots, 6.9 knots. We'll do CFM. 400, 450, 460, 470, 474 CFM. Let's see, we'll do feet versus, I can't read it. And we'll do kilometers an hour again. Woo! Needless to say, it's moving just enough air. 8.89, 8.9. The point is that you want to put your thermistor, your temperature gauge right here, like right in here, and you want to measure your air that's coming out. Don't stick it inside. That will give you an accurate reading. So now what we're going to do is we're going to run it. I don't need to zoom in on the wattmeter. We're going to run it, and by the way, this is your foot pedal hookup or your auxiliary from your radio, so you don't have to rely on the internal keying transistor. I know you requested that. I didn't forget, it's in there. We're listening to the fans. So we know that right now the power supply is idling at 20 volts, and when we put it in transmission, it goes, pew, drops way down, right? Listen to the fans, they stay constant. Hello, 1 1, hello, 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1, hello, hello, 1 1 1, hello, 1 1 1 1 1, hello, 1 2 1 2 1 2, hello, 1 2. Nice and constant, and that's what we're striving for. I covered a lot in this video that a lot of people take as just second nature. Oh, well, I knew that because I read it on the internet and you don't know it, so therefore I'm smarter than you. Haha, I have to pay attention. I'm going to reiterate, y'all, I live in a world where knowledge is free, and you should as well. Be good to your fellow radio operators that are around you, because the mother nature that we're enjoying right now, the skip that we're enjoying right now, will not last. And at the end of the day, for a year or two, you're going to have to end up talking every day to your locals. Don't be a dick. Be nice to each other. If you have knowledge that you've either learned from me or picked up some other place, don't hesitate to share it with other radio operators. Don't. So, to ship one of these things, because they're so off-center in weight, you're going to go to Home Depot. And you're going to buy yourself a pink foam board. This pink foam board you're going to put on the inside of whatever the box is. So you're going to put your 2 inches worth of bubble wrap all the way around the thing. And you're going to put double foam or triple foam board around the control switches over here on the front to protect them. But you have to build a solid, hard something to carry the impact load of this stupidly heavy amplifier. I was talking with Carl, like I said one time, many years ago in a galaxy far, far away. And I think this is back when him and Carol were still running Xforce. I mean, it's been a long time, right? He says to me, man, actually, he talks like, his voice, how do I describe his voice? If you were to take your voice and run it over broken glass, throw in 5 packs of cigarettes a day and smoke those for 40 years. The only way I figured out to make them things so I can ship them is I gotta go down to Lowe's or something like that, and I got to get some of that hard foam board insulation. I have to line the inside a box of that. Man, I smoked Marlboro Reds for 22 years. I can't do his voice. It's rough, dude. It's rough. I mean, I could say some things, but I don't really want to because I kind of like him. I mean, he's been around for a hot minute. There's some stuff going on right now, but I'm not getting into this. It's not my goddamn business, right? I'm just here to fix the amps. He was using, so we're going to double this. We'll put 2 layers of this on the top and the bottom. And then we'll put a layer on the sides and a layer on the back and the front. And then I'll take pool noodle and I'll put it over the front to protect the switches. You're trying to reinforce the cardboard from the inside. On the bigger amps, like this would be a small amp, on the bigger amps that he was putting out where they had 4 transformers in it, he would go and he would put plywood. So he'd put a sheet of plywood on the bottom, sheet of plywood on the top, and then he'd put 2 inches, this is like 1 inch thick foam board. Yeah, this is 1 inch thick. You take 2 inch thick foam board and you put it all the way up between the amplifier and the plywood, and then you put a cardboard box around it. The foam board allows us to have a little bit more strength in the box. If you see how they handle packages, the only time the thing is really handled by hand anymore is when it gets picked up and put on the truck. From there, it's on a set of conveyor belts and kick arms and push elements. And if you want to have a cringe look at the shipping industry that we have going on today in this world today, just go Google it and watch like modern marvels of package shipment, and you're going to see these things get kicked and shoved and thrown and dropped on conveyor belts. This thing's so heavy. This is the kind of thing that we package up and then we go, we cross our fingers, we put the foam cup on our balls, we put the aluminum hat on, and we quietly pray to whatever deity you choose to worship and say, God, please let this thing make it in one piece. That's why I didn't get excited when the thing showed up and it had this corner all blown out. Now I've gone and I've pushed the corner back out and made it square again. But these corners take a hell of a lot of punishment. They're just gonna. That's why we try to mitigate that with the foam board. This is a tip and a trick. I mean, you can go to Home Depot and buy these 2 foot by 2 foot, 1 inch thick pieces of foam board, I think for like $8 or $9, right? So I spent $50 on foam board today, another $20 on a double reinforced UPS standardized box. I'm probably going to put another $10 worth of bubble wrap inside this thing, and then we're going to pray. Just saying, you out there that watch every single thing I do, the amp builders that are out there, if you're working with these iron core heavy duty transformered power supplies like this, amplifiers, this is the best tip I've ever learned for making these things survive. It's lightweight, it's closed cell foam, so it's going to have some high crush resistance to it. It helps spread the load out, and it's not metal into cardboard with just air bladders in between. Food for thought. Gentlemen, this is the end of this saga for this box. I'm going to go work probably the next hour or so on getting this thing packaged for this guy. I want to say thank you to all the Patreon supporters. They're the reason that we all get to be here with each other every single day. I do the one-to-one system. I produce the content. You guys are, I leave it up to you all to figure out if you want to help support it or not. I'm grateful for every bit of support I do get. This channel does not run on the hopes and dreams and tears of small children in third world countries, and it helps offset some days 75 to 100 plus phone calls that I get at that number. I always try to help every single person I can. That's my goal. I've managed to attract more attention through being kind and courteous to people and trying to be knowledgeable and helpful, and not having a problem saying I don't know. If you call me and you ask me a question, I'll be the first one to tell you. If I don't know, I'll be like, I don't fucking know. Let's call so-and-so, he might know. Or let's go call so-and-so, he might fucking know, right? There shouldn't be any down look in the radio community, or actually in any community, when somebody that's trying to help other people says that. I don't know. How hard is that? I don't know. But let's go find out. That's why we both know. You know. I appreciate everybody's support. I really thank God for the Patreons. They get behind the scenes content. They get usually pictures on what I'm working on every single day. Just come check it out if you're interested in wanting to support. Thanks to MechMan. Shout out to Siglant. Big shout out to XS. They've got a brand new product that's coming on the market, and I cannot wait to go and take a look at it and review it for all of you guys to see maybe if it's something that you all can use. I think it might be. I think it's like a 50-50 split. We'll see. Big shout out to Penna Labs. Remember, mention BBI on checkout with any of your tube purchases and you'll get 5% off. Thanks to Bird and Coaxial Dynamics, even though I haven't had to call them and use them for anything in a long, long time. And the most important thing is thank you guys for being here watching me do what I do. Every thumbs up, every like, every share, every comment, it all helps. It all helps with the algorithm. And as far as the algorithm is concerned, I'm dead, dog meat. I'm on the back burner of the universe. I'm never going to be Mr. Carlson's lab. I only work on one small facet of electronics. He works on everything. I mean, it is what it is. I'm not going to be Fran Lab, which she's awesome, by the way. I'm just me. And I thank you for tuning in and watching this. Gentlemen, I am BBI. I'm the biggest mud duck in Idaho, without a doubt. Fact. I don't know what good that does. I don't know why I even brag about it, but I'm just saying it. I'll see you. Peace. Click, click.